in a way, you know what Katniss is fighting for, but you don't know what Peeta is fighting for till the very end of the story. What it's almost like the whole idea of belief. Like, what do you choose to believe?
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to another episode of A Lost Plot, the podcast by storytellers for storytellers, so that we can tell better stories ourselves. As always, I'm your host, Maverick, and today we have back with us our co-host, Avalon, to review the third installment in the 4-part film series and the 3-part book series, The Hunger Games, Mockingjay, Part 1. This film was, of course, based off of the book Mockingjay, or The Hunger Games Mockingjay by Suzanne Collins. The screenplay was by Peter Craig and Danny Strong, and it was directed by Francis Lawrence, and it came out in 2014. I mean, if you've been seeing us review these, you know that this was the next one in the series, so no surprise there. Avalon, what was your initial impressions and rating for this film?
The movie itself is interesting being a part 1, so it's only half of the book, of course, but it does kind of have some, it sets things up for the finale, if you would, of the movie. So it doesn't have the complete story arcs, if you will. It has things set up, getting ready for the last one, but it doesn't bring there's a lot of things that aren't concluded in this movie. So it's just setting you up for the next one, in a way.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting to look at how they took this from a cinematic standpoint, just because there's some things that I think you almost wonder if it's going to leave you lacking something whenever they take a film like this and cut it into 2 parts. They've done this with other films. For example, the Harry Potter, the last film in that series, they did the same thing. So we'll get into what our thoughts are on this one. But before we get too deep into it, my rating was a 5.95. What did you get?
Wow. Mine was a 6.3, so we're not too far off.
There you go. Nice. Similar minds on this one. Interesting. Well, let's see why exactly we got that. This one was, for me, I looked at my previous ratings. Obviously, the first one got the highest rating so far for me, and this one came in second, above the last review by about 0.3. So it's not too crazy. They're all within a point of each other, but it was still interesting to see that this one, even though it's a part 1 of a part 2, had that high of a score. So we'll get into why that is the case. But before we do, if you are unfamiliar with The Hunger Games Mockingjay Part 1, Avalon, you want to give the audience a taste of what it is all about.
So Mockingjay picks up where Catching Fire left off. We are shown Katniss brought to District 13, the supposed destroyed district, which is actually still around, just hiding underground. And she's introduced to the rebellion against Panem and the districts. And she's introduced to President Coin and some of the other characters over there. And we're reintroduced to characters like BT, Finnick, Gale. And we're just a bunch of characters in the past movies were brought back. However, it's emphasized how Peeta was left behind in the end of the last movie and is now a prisoner, supposedly, of Panem, as well as Joanna and some of the other tributes. So we see Katniss. She, even though she helped, she's now on the run from Panem and is with the enemies of Panem. They want her to be a symbol of their resistance. She doesn't want to be at first, and she kind of keeps that going until she sees a video of Peeta advocating for Panem, trying to get the districts to stop their rebelling. At which point she changes her mind and makes a deal with Coin, and she starts to play the part of propaganda machine and symbol for the rebellion. So, and then we see a back and forth between Panem and the District 13 for the rest of this movie.
Yeah, and you get a lot of different ideas off the bat. This film is going to be very different from the ones we had seen previously, partially because they're not doing the games like they had been doing previously. But in addition, you see that there's an emphasis on a different role for her, right? In the first 2, she was part of a propaganda machine that she couldn't help. And it was part of these games, right? Versus in this one, you see that she is being asked to be a willing participant in propaganda to help a war. So it's definitely a different take on a violent infrastructure that has been built that is now coming to a head in this film. But yeah, so we'll get into what exactly the thoughts are on this one, but let's start off. No, go ahead.
Oh, if you think about it, she's doing the same role she did in the last two movies, but it's different because it's not for Panem. She's not a symbol for the oppression of Panem. She's now a symbol for this hope of freedom. So
yeah, exactly. Let's start off, though, with Katniss, because she is obviously the protagonist, as she has been in the last two films. She is this person who starts off, she's having this mental breakdown, thinking about how Peeta did not escape, but she did, and feeling some sort of tension and regret around that. And then they proceed to try to make this deal with her, where they go, hey, we need you to be the head and symbol of the resistance that we are as we wage war against the Capitol. What are your thoughts on the opening of this film, specifically as they introduced Katniss to us again? What are your thoughts on her?
You almost want to say the darkest moment has already happened, though that's not completely true in this movie, because it's like she's coming off of the darkest moment at the end of the last movie, where it's like she really wanted to save Peeta, and she really wanted him to be the one who survived the Hunger Games and get out, not her. But in her way, she got out and he's now a prisoner still. And all her plans that she made were torn apart because everyone else had plans that she didn't know about. So she's distraught, somewhat understandably. And so like and she also feels betrayed because Hamish and others didn't keep their end of the deal in her eyes. And she doesn't want to play the propaganda machine. She just cares about Peeta and safety of the people she cares about. So, and as far as the opening, I would say that it wasn't the best one in the series in my mind, but it was okay. It was definitely like, okay, this is serviceable and gets us into the story. Introduces us to District 13 and these characters. And it worked for what we're trying to do. So, I mean, could have been better, maybe a little bit, but I mean, I didn't find it as grabbing as perhaps the openings of the first two movies. So,
yeah, that's an interesting point. I mean, I really enjoyed this opener because of the emphasis that it put on the emotional stakes that are involved in reintroducing us to those, right? As she's trying to calm herself down and remind herself that everything, like what she cares about, what she's invested in here, and at the same time freaking out because she can't get the one that she loves is still captured by the Capitol, and all of these things are built up inside of her. But yeah, you don't get the same thing that you get in the previous two, where you have somebody being offered as a tribute for the games, right? And they raise the three fingers in salute in honor of the person who is now being basically sacrificed for the sake of these games. You don't have that, but you still have the emotional stakes reintroduced at the start. And you also have that at the end. A little bit of my overall thoughts is I thought that they take something that they introduced at the very beginning in regards to emotional stakes and bring it back in a new light at the end of the film, which I really liked how those were bookended very well, and they really lean into those emotions at the beginning and end of the film. So that was one of the things that actually impressed me a lot on how they took a film that's a part one and part two and still made some cohesiveness into how we experience it, just because they are very interconnected in regards to what we are introduced to at the beginning and at the end of this film. I don't know if you have thoughts on that.
The only other thing I just thought of that was actually kind of a funny note, but it's like we're also kind of given a little bit of foreshadowing in a way, because, well, I mean, it was kind of teased a little bit at the end of the last one, and as the audience and everyone around Katniss, you start to see that she is developing feelings for Peeta, but she doesn't recognize it herself. And even in this like opening sequence, you're given the idea that she does really care about Peeta, but she doesn't realize how much she cares about Peeta, not until later in the movie. So, yeah.
And you get that through other characters as well as they develop those. But yes, 100%. I think that the emotional stakes is what really stuck out to me. You see that she is, as she has been consistently, while she's very devoted to the people around her, she is a reluctant hero, right?
Yes.
Where she doesn't really want to be involved in the stakes here, but everyone else around her in this situation are trying to somewhat coerce, somewhat convince her that this is the right thing to do. And she's always not wanted to be part of the propaganda machine, but that's what they want her to do, right? They want her to be involved in this war as spearheading it, as the person that everyone has always looked to, who has started the flame in the other districts. They want her to continue to fan that flame as the symbol for them. Did you think that that was a convincing and interesting dynamic that pushed her as the protagonist forward into this film?
Yeah, I would say so. I mean, it puts pressure on her in a way that she's been put under pressure before, but in a different way. And you also kind of see the opposite end of it, where, I mean, people chose her for this plan at the end of the last movie, and then you see Coin expressing doubts about, like, Katniss being their symbol for this rebellion, even though Plutarch and Haymitch are like, no, she's the one. Just got to give her what she wants and help her, like, push her in the right way. So,
well, yeah. I mean, did you think it was believable? Did you think it was convincing? Do you think that the way that they, because I mean, in a lot of ways, the motivation of the primary character is what gets us to then buy into the plot, right? And so, did you think that her buy-in in this film was a believable one? Because in the other one, she didn't really have a choice. It was do this or die. In this one, she has a different motive for being involved. Did you think that it was convincing?
I think eventually it is. I mean, because the reality is she doesn't choose to do it immediately. She's still hesitant. She's still reluctant. But she's also like, everyone she cares about is getting involved. Gale is already involved with the rebellion in 13. Apparently her mom and her sister are now safe in 13. I mean, like, her family is now indebted to 13. She just does. She's like hesitant to just become the symbol, even though everyone wants her to be the symbol. It's not really like. It's not until she realizes that Peeta's life is potentially in danger in 13 that she begins to realize, I actually need to do something on my own if he's going to be safe. Because she is convinced that Peeta is being forced to give these messages for Panem, to try to stop to like give these speeches to try to convince the districts to stop rebelling against Panem, to stop, get back to work, to go back to peace, to stop believing the lies of, I mean, well, I forget if he calls it lies of Katniss or not, but like, you get the idea. Like, he is taking on the opposite role. Like, he's the propaganda machine for Panem now. And she realizes that if Panem loses, Peeta's life is in danger now, potentially, because 13 will see him as a traitor. So she realizes, so she takes on the role, more or less, to make the demand that Peeta and the other tributes don't get killed, that they don't get, like, they get a full pardon, because she believes they're being forced. So, I mean, in that way, it's kind of believable, especially considering that she actually likes Peeta and loves Peeta, even though she doesn't admit it yet. It's like, okay, that's actually believable. Like, okay, why you would do that. So, and then she's forced to stay in the role because Coin, more or less, even though she agrees to the conditions, she also points out that if she fails to uphold her end of the bargain, then the deal's over. So Katniss is now in a forever position till this war is over, to, just to keep Peeta safe.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. And you see, I think one of the things that I liked about this is that it highlighted for us as the audience that this is the same character we've been dealing with in the last two, right?
Yes.
She in some ways is this small town girl who doesn't really, she wants to live a simpler life, right? She doesn't want to be part of this grand war that everyone else is involved in, but everyone else wants her to be involved in this war because she has become the symbol that everyone else wants to push their own agenda forward. And she's revolting against this in some ways, saying, I don't want to be a part of this. I don't want to be the symbol you guys all asked me to be. But then she sees the necessity of being involved, right? Which is just so key. And so I think they did very well at both maybe taking the old version that we know of, that we have seen in the last two films, and now giving her this choice of like, you can choose to be involved or not. And then also at the same time putting her in the situation where she has to choose. So even though technically it's her choice, there's no way she could reject it, right? She has to find a way to save the people that she cares about, which is what has driven her in the past two films, right? Especially with Prim in the first one. And then, well, in the second one, she was just stuck. But, you know, and then in this one now, she's actually once again put in a situation where she feels the need to care for the people, the people that she cares about are in jeopardy. So yeah. I thought that,
well, even in the second
her motivations are very strong.
Yeah. Well, even the second one, she is still trying to protect people, even though she's forced to go to the games. Because at first she's like trying to play to Snow's wishes, trying to act like the lover, more or less, to Peeta, to try to convince Snow that they're actually in love and to convince him. Like, she's doing that to protect her family and to protect people she cares about. When that fails and she's forced to go back to the games, then it becomes a thing where it's like, oh, now I'm just trying to protect Peeta. Now I'm trying to make sure he's the one who survives this time and gets out.
Yeah.
So it's like, it's been a consistent trait of hers throughout all three movies. So she's just falling back into that similar trait and pattern in the third one. So
yeah, 100%. You see this progresses in some ways for her, as once she sees the need, right, with Peeta to be involved and try to save him and to save the other tributes who have been captured, that they then go off to District 12, and she sees the demolition that occurs there, where the Capitol destroyed her home and everyone that was there, and she sees the aftermath of this and is in many ways distraught by what has occurred. What are your thoughts on her involvement in that, especially because she's accompanied by other people who knew more or less what had happened and were already part of this war, right? For example, with Gale.
I mean, she already was told what had happened to 12 by that point in the movie, like in the end of the second movie. So she already knew, but it's one thing to be told about something and to experience it for yourself. I mean, you could be told about the atrocities of war, about the carnage of a car crash, or anything like that. You could be told about all these different situations, but until you actually live through that situation and you realize how terrifying or how terrible it is, that can completely change your outlook and impression of all of the events and your associations with that. So, I mean, her going to 12, like, and experiencing firsthand, like, what happened, it gives her a new perspective on what Panem has done and on how far they've gone to try to hurt her and to try to hurt the people she's cared about. So,
yeah. And you see that to the degree, too, where Gale goes into his little monologue in that one about how he was there, right, when it happened, and how he tried to save people and did what he could to protect people in that scenario. And he couldn't, right? People were so desperate to escape and trying to see a solution out there that would not be able to actually protect them, that he was only able to save a few, right? And even within that, he regrets wondering, were there more people I could save, right? And so he's in some ways on the other end of this, and he's he was already involved in it because he was already part of the resistance. This is one of the parts that I think they touched on. I'm not as fuzzy. I'm a little fuzzy on. Maybe you can explain a little bit better his involvement.
So technically, Gale isn't part of 13's rebellion till the third book, when they escape 12. So he doesn't actually join the rebellion till 12 is more or less when they all escape from 12 and they all escape. So essentially the very end of the second book, beginning of the third book. So Katniss and Gale sort of joined 13 at the same time, though Gale was definitely more gung-ho about joining, and he was definitely that way in the book, where like in the second movie they kind of show him like wanting to take more of a stance against Panem and against the games and against Snow. So that's definitely like he definitely had an inkling already towards that, but here he's like, okay, now he actually has an outlet. Now he actually can participate. Now he actually can take a gun or a crossbow, whatever, and do some damage.
Yeah.
So.
Well, especially because you see that that's a stronger driving force for him compared to her, right? And you see that from the beginning where he's talking about in language such as this, versus her, she wants to protect the people that she cares about and doesn't really want to get involved in the Capitol. You see the same thing going on here in a reverse in that those maybe primary and secondary goals are reversed for both of them, where he wants to fight against the Capitol, but then also he cares about Katniss and cares about the other people around him, versus her primary goal is to protect the people around her. And then as a consequence, she has this care to stop the Capitol in some way, even though she doesn't really think she can do anything. You see more of that in this one, where you see that still she doesn't really want to fight the Capitol, versus Gale is definitely involved in the war effort. He wants to see everything stopped, and he's in some ways also seeing the secondary care being lost in some ways, as he sees that the people that he cares about are not really reciprocating that in the way that he wishes, specifically Katniss.
Yeah. No, that's one of the more interesting, well, I guess we could touch on this, but like Katniss and Gale's relationship. I mean, because even from the very beginning of the first movie, like they had like sort of a love for each other in the first one, that she gets taken to the games, the whole thing with Peeta happens. And then from there, it's almost like this triangle where it's like she has to choose between Peeta and Gale constantly, like, and then she has to perform, like, looking like she's in love with Peeta for most of the second story. Now she's not in that limelight anymore, so she doesn't have to perform, and she's like sort of like trying to keep the relationship with Gale because that's what she thinks she wants, but she's also still distraught about leaving Peeta behind, and she actually does care about Peeta, though she doesn't fully recognize that yet. And so she's still torn, even though Peeta's not there. And Gale can kind of see that, though. He can see that she still cares about Peeta, even though he's not present.
No, 100%. And that's like one of the things that I think creates an interesting dynamic as the books and films progress, right? You see this conflict that goes on inside of Katniss that changes as the films progress, from being one that she's almost disgusted with the idea of being with Peeta, to the point where now she's like, okay, I need him to be alive. He needs to live, even if anyone else or everyone else dies, right? Yeah. So I think that there's a really good slow development of that arc specifically, which is done very well, and that's continued in this one, and it's put in contrast to Gale's arc. So 100%. You see that this film has a very strong emphasis on the propaganda machine, right? And one of the main things is, once she agrees to join the war effort, they want to use her as this front-facing piece of propaganda to encourage unrest amongst the different districts. And they first take her to District 12, and they also take her to District 8, where there was the massive destruction which occurred there, and she visits the hospital. What are your thoughts on the development of conflict within this film? Do you think that it's compelling? Do you think that it's not? Because she's not exactly at war for a good portion of it. She has a few small skirmishes, but she's mostly basically creating propaganda pieces.
Yeah. It's interesting because, I mean, the conflict is less physical with her and more symbolic, where it's like you see her taking on the role of the Mockingjay, and some of the things she did in the first two movies are now used in the districts as symbols of like freedom and like communication between each other. And so now it's like, and the Capitol has picked up on that. And it's just like the Mockingjay will not be used as no one will be wearing the Mockingjay symbol. No one will be like using the Mockingjays in any form, because they see it as association with Katniss and rebelling against the Capitol. And then there's that whistle, the three fingers. Like there's like these little things like symbolic that the districts have picked up on, are now using regularly as a form of protest, if you will, if not outright rebellion. And so Katniss is more or less leaning into that a little bit more and giving them like more symbols, like with her propaganda, like leaning into the Mockingjay stuff. And she sings the Hanging Tree song, which gets broadcast out too. Which, by the way, after after the prequel Songbird of the Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes, that whole scene in the movie takes on a whole little different meaning with them singing that song.
In this one or in the previous one?
No, in this one, where like they break the dam, they're singing this song where it's like, okay.
That's interesting. I hadn't really thought about that.
I mean, because the song is literally about what Snow did when he was a teenager, when he was a young man. Like the first friend he betrayed.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. That's true. That's a fair point. And I guess it did originate in District 12, so that would make sense that they would know it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely interesting. I think that there is a lot of things that are going on around Katniss which lend to conflict in the scenario. It's definitely one that I don't think is the strongest, especially in comparison to the other films, which I guess is denoted by the fact that it's not the highest rating I have so far in this series. But the idea that, she's seeing people die around her, right? She's seeing the people who are in the hospital all get blown to smithereens. She sees that all of District 12 was blown to smithereens, and she's seeing that other people are being put at risk as a consequence. And you see a few times where there are actual stakes involved with people that she cares about, right? When Gale goes to save Peeta, for example, that's definitely a point where there are stakes involved in the people that she cares about, which is a primary, the goal for her, and like the motivation for her is at stake. So that is definitely a valuable scene for us as the audience to be invested as well. I think that because it lends itself toward propaganda, there are times where maybe it feels a little slower in the beginning, or in the middle, I should say, as you wonder, okay, is she at risk? Is she not? And then, of course, if you believe that she's at risk, maybe it's more compelling. But overall, you get the impression that probably she's not as at risk as if she was, say, actually at the front lines more, right? If that makes sense.
Well, the big thing that's driving the conflict of this movie is Peeta is clearly being held by the Capitol, and she cares about Peeta. And we, as the audience, and as Katniss doesn't know what they're doing to Peeta. She suspects they're doing something to him because of how he looks on the camera and how, like, what she sees. She strongly suspects they're doing something to him, and she wants to rescue him. And she knows the longer she puts this off of, like, rescuing him, the more he's going to have to suffer. And so, like, we, as the audience, I think that's kind of the driving force of the conflict, where she's trying to get the conflict to a point where they can actually go rescue him and rescue those who are captured by the Capitol. But at the same time, we don't know what's going on in the Capitol. We don't know why Peeta's agreed to do these promotional videos, this propaganda for the Capitol, for Panem. So it creates a lot of uncertainty and, like, mystery, where it's like, what is going on? Like, we don't actually know what's going on for a good section of the middle of this movie.
Yeah, well, and that would probably be worth a discussion right now, because I would agree that of the elements that are involved in this one, they highlight Peeta, especially at the beginning, as being a motivating force for Katniss. And you get that constant reminder throughout this film as you see that Peeta is being returned to as both perhaps symbolically, but also as a question for us as the audience. As you see, he's urging everyone to not fight, right? That is this really what you want, is a question he's constantly posing as he's being used in these propaganda pieces by the Capitol. And it leads us to wonder, okay, is Peeta truly what Katniss says he is, and is doing this against his will? But at the same time, the words that he's saying are words that you could see him saying. I mean, they are words that he would align with someone who doesn't want to fight, right? And that's something that he constantly echoed in the first two films, is that he's not a fighter. He's a lover, not a fighter. Why would he fight here, right? So the idea that he is actually supporting a fight-free zone, or like a lay down the arms, right? Let's not cause war here, makes sense for a character like him, which is the other intention. Is he truly on their side, or is he actually doesn't really believe in the cause that Katniss is now fighting for?
Yeah. Well, the big thing that raises a question in the audience's mind and everyone's mind is that in the games, he made a profession of love towards Katniss. And in private, Katniss and Haymitch and others know that the love was genuine on Peeta's part, even if it was returned on by Katniss. So it is plausible that he struck a deal with Capitol and is doing these promotional vids in an attempt to protect Katniss. Like, that is a legitimate, like, that is stated at one point, and it's a legitimate and compelling argument that would fit his character. so we just automatically assume it and believe it because it fits. And then throughout the rest of the movie, even though we see him doing these promotional videos, it's almost like we're not sure what's going on. We are led to believe he might still be playing this part for the Capitol. And then the whole like attack on 13 happens, and it looks like he may have given them a head start warning. He may have given them so that they could get to safety. So like get to the bunker down below, so when the bombing happens, no one is really killed, no one is hurt. So it's one of those things where it's like the whole movie kind of plays with you as the audience. We're like, you're not sure, but I mean, you're led to believe he does, like, because of Katniss, that he's doing this for Katniss, but you're also not sure. It never confirms that.
Yeah, and even the end, I guess you could question whether or not that's truly accurate, and it might be worth coming into discussion of now. I mean, we're already discussing Peeta. What did you think about the ending? You get an arc. Well, okay, maybe. Yeah, no, let's talk about it now. So, and we'll get to Snow and the villains after this. But the idea that you see is that there's a warning, more or less, when Peeta gets captured, that things are not as they ought to be, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then you see that they end up freeing Peeta, and they are rehabilitating him in District 13. And Katniss goes to comfort him, and instead he tries to kill her.
Mm-hmm.
And this is like totally not the Peeta we've seen before. This is a terrible change of circumstances where no longer are they friends, and no longer does it look like he loves her. Instead, he's there to make sure that she dies.
Mm-hmm.
And this is totally shocking to her, and they realize that he has been messed with in the head, and he's been, what did they say, hijacked to try to kill her instead. His brain's been hijacked. What were your thoughts on how they concluded the film with him and the impact this has on Katniss, all of that stuff?
Well, for one thing, it reframes the whole like propaganda part, because he's actually is doing this because he believes Katniss is a threat, but it's because Capitol has been poisoning his mind with fear and like turning his perception of her into an enemy, into something to destroy, something to be against. Of course, it also is shows how far Snow is willing to go as a villain to mess with his enemies and to destroy them, because he knows, because at the end of the second movie, and it even hints at it partway through this movie, when Finnick and Katniss are having a talk in the bunker, where it's like he admits that he thought it was an act, the love between Peeta and Katniss, until they were in the arena, and Peeta almost dies to the electrocution. At that point, Finnick realized that Katniss actually did love Peeta, and that's when his perception of them changed. And then, like, in telling Katniss this, Katniss suddenly realizes, oh wait, I do love Peeta, because until that moment she's not really acknowledging it, and she kind of just sees it as like a friend, as like someone she meant to protect and failed. But now she's like, oh wait, I'm doing this because I love Peeta and I care about him and I don't want him to die. And Snow also saw that during the second Hunger Games in the Catching Fire. He saw that, so of course he also hijacked Peeta because he knew there was a possibility that Peeta and Katniss would come back together, and that would be the opportunity for Peeta to kill Katniss. So, in a messed up way, as a villain, it's perfect way to like use what someone loves against them. So, and I think that's what Snow, I mean, as a villain, that's what one of Snow's probably biggest strengths is. He knows how to use people against each other in a way. He knows how to manipulate and to get what he needs and what he wants. He knows how to make things difficult for his enemies and how to best destroy them. So
yeah, he's utilizing what they care about against them, and he's been doing that from the start, especially with, for example, in the second one, where he's threatening Katniss's family if she doesn't go along with the propaganda that he's telling her to conduct, and in other scenarios as well, when he's talking to the game masters, for example. Like, he is very much into playing an elaborate game to get at the people that he wants to get at to achieve the ends and the goals that he has in mind. So 100%, it's not surprising that he was playing a game like this. We just hadn't seen him go to these lengths to try to do so, which is interesting because he is pretty confident in where he's going with this when he sees her at the very end. And you see that they're trying to free Peeta, and then Snow more or less tells her, "Oh, I know where you guys are. I know you're trying to free him right now. Just remember that." Something along what does he say? He says he has a pretty good line.
He's like, it's the things that we love most that destroy us, or something like that.
Yeah.
And he says that right before he admits that he knows that they're in the rescuing Peeta down below. That they're in the tribute tower or whatever they called it. Yeah, but he's indirectly acknowledging what he did to Peeta in that moment, without telling us and telling her what he did.
Yeah, did you think that he was a compelling villain in this one? Especially because I don't think you get as much screen time.
Oh, you don't get less screen time with him this time.
Yeah.
You do get some, but it's this time it's because with Snow, his presence, as I said before in one of the other podcasts, he's kind of, because he is the ruler, the head of Panem. He is the leader of the capital. So in a way, he doesn't have a direct face and he doesn't show up in the conflict as much because he's using other people. He's using Peeta. He's using Caesar Flickerman. He's using other characters and people to speak what he wants to be said. He gets other soldiers to do what he wants done. So it's like they're acting on behalf of him. And so, but he's just very masterful. Like he knows what Katniss wants. He knows what she cares about, and he knows how to use that to his advantage. So even though he doesn't have a strong presence, if you will, it's enough that we understand what Snow is doing, and we understand why he's dangerous, and why we are against him. So yeah, at least as the primary antagonist of this. So.
Yeah, he's definitely, for the amount of screen time that he has, he's very strong, and that's partially because they've utilized what we know of him from the previous films and capitalized on that in this one. So they didn't need as much screen time of Snow to still get across the idea that he is a masterful player of the game and he knows how to play it well to get what he wants. I think that other than that, you pretty much get the classic stormtroopers coming to kill everyone type scenario with everything else, and it's between those two things that they drive the conflict forward. Is the other part as convincing? I don't think that the army is the more convincing aspect of it, but it's also because it doesn't come as much into conflict with Katniss and her goals. Most of the conflict revolves around her and her relationship to Peeta, and then of course Coriolanus Snow utilizing that to his own ends, which that shows up primarily at the beginning and is interspersed a little bit in the middle, but not as much, and then at the very end, of course. Anyways, I think there's some other characters that are worth a discussion of. There's, especially in regards to the propaganda that is now being utilized against the Capitol, there's some key characters. What are your thoughts on the character of, what's his name?
Plutarch Heavensbee.
Plutarch. That's right. Because he gets a lot more screen time in this one than probably even in the last one.
Yeah.
And you see him for who he truly is in this one versus in the last one, he was playing a game that you don't realize until the end.
Well, even in the prior movie, he is doing what he does best. Where it's like he plays propaganda and like making like videos and messages to influence people. Like he's a master at that in a way. Whereas like he knows what will influence people, what will get people to go in a certain nudge people in a certain direction. But in Catching Fire, he was playing he was a doubles agent, if you will. Like he was actually working against Panem and trying to get Katniss for District 13. Now he's actually able to be his true self in a way, but he's still doing the role of creating propaganda and creating messages. So he is I say he's a very interesting character. I mean, he's in a way, he takes the role of Haymitch from the previous two movies, because Haymitch has a much smaller role in this movie. Not that he's absent, because he definitely is involved in a few key moments, and he does. But as far as the character goes, he's not really like developed more. He's
Mhm.
there for few like story beats, and just ignore more or less the old like one is just to say he's there pretty much, and the other one that he still like cares about Katniss, and the other one is where he helps to refine what Katniss should actually be doing in these propaganda videos.
Right.
Other than that, Plutarch actually has the role of what Haymitch was, where it's like he's kind of coaching her in what she should be saying, what she should be doing, in like guiding, like getting these symbols and messages made for the districts to keep them going, to push them into further rebellion, to further furor and wrath against the capital. He's a very so I mean, as far as the character goes, he's very he knows what he wants. He knows what people need to be pushed in the right direction, but he also recognizes when people aren't doing like when they first start doing the messages with Katniss, it's clear he's a little frustrated because he sees that she's not doing that Katniss isn't convincing enough in the videos. And that frustrates him. So it's like he knows what needs to happen, but he isn't always successful in getting what he wants. So other than that, I mean, we don't really get like other than the end of Panem, like the end of the capital, we don't really get a whole lot of like motive from Plutarch, if that makes any sense.
Yeah.
So I mean, other than that as a character, so in that way, he's not like a complete character, I would say. He works, and he definitely get enough of a character to be believable and to believe he's human. And we don't have to know everything, what every character wants. But
Sure.
At the same time, like we know enough to believe him as a character, but we perhaps could have known more, but it's okay. So this movie has already got a chock full of characters anyway, so
yeah, and he's definitely provides the in regards to being an asset to the people. He has the analytical standpoint where you can see when things should be utilized, how things should be utilized, and so he's being this logical sounding board and how to play this game from the ally perspective, the good guy's perspective in this film, which they didn't really have before. And you can see that probably most clearly because with Alma Coin, who is the president of the good guy side, and you see that with her presence maybe lacks a lot before he shows up. What are your thoughts on her as a character?
Well, I do have one thought, but I almost think that should wait till the next podcast because that's slight spoilers for the next podcast.
Sure.
But Alma Coin, I mean, the impression you get of District 13 is it's a very militarized district where it's like they have to be like this because they've been living in rebellion for decades and they've been trying to hide out from Panem and stay alive. So they have a very rigid structure and like they survive on the bare necessities, if you will. So like even their lifestyle, their place, it's like it's all very simplistic. It's all like simple, if you will. And even in the way Coin carries herself, you get the impression she's like almost like a military leader, if you will. That's what she comes across strongly. Not very empathetic. She knows how to fight. She knows how to lead, but she doesn't know how to like do propaganda and like stir people up in her like as Plutarch does. So when Plutarch shows up, like he provides something that she actually needs, even if she doesn't directly say she needs it. And her concerns are with stopping Panem and killing President Snow. So
yeah, she's looking for a very black and white scenario where this is the right thing to do, this is the wrong thing to do, this is how you do it. Are you an asset? Great, let's use you. Are you not? Okay, well, this is a waste of time. And this is one of her misgivings with Katniss at the beginning, where she thinks, this was a mistake. We should have gotten Peeta because he's going to be the asset for us, not Katniss. And then Plutarch has to go, no, she's the right one. We just got to, fine tune a few things, get her on board, and then we're going to be good. And so he is trying to convince her that this is the right method to go with. I thought that her character, definitely you needed a character like this. And I wonder
also, she has more... Oh, sorry.
No, go ahead.
She actually has more development than Plutarch does, technically, because we're get told about her husband and daughter, I guess, or like her child. They got killed and attacked by the Capitol. So, like, which is more or less giving us a little bit more motivation on her part, so why she's so against Panem. Was like, well, yeah, her family got killed by it. So, yeah.
Right. Yeah. And she's definitely got a reason to be there, and she's got motive. I don't know if this was just me, but I was constantly wondering as I watched this film if this character would be a leader in this scenario, just because maybe it was her acting that I didn't feel like was convincing, but there was nothing charismatic about her character at all before Plutarch shows up. And yeah, she's been the leader of this group for at least a while. And I guess that led me to wonder, how is she the leader of this group all this time when it doesn't seem like she has a lot going for her? I mean, is she just like incredibly intelligent or incredibly strategic in some way? I was a little confused on that point, because it seems like maybe if they're incredibly militaristic, it's a what would you call that, like a military based society, and so they go based off of might rather than
like rank or something.
Rank rather than persuasion. Well, yeah, but she's she's looking for democratic reform at the same time, so I don't know.
Well, that could be discussed in the next podcast, the next one. We got part two. Okay. Because, I mean, there are things that I think about her character that are important to discuss, but you can't discuss them without discussing part two. And admittedly, when we had this discussion of rating part one, part two together, I almost said we should rate them both together at the same time because of some things like this. But it's just like, well, because technically The Hunger Games is a continuous story from beginning to end, I would argue that part one, we could review part one on its own, and we just have to acknowledge that certain character arcs and story arcs don't conclude at the end of this movie. Like, there are things that conclude in the next one. And so things have not come to an end yet. And like, in of the four movies, this is the one that has a more open-ended, well, it's left more open-ended because it's a cliffhanger in a way. Leads into the fourth. So
yeah, and you see that especially because at the end, when she's giving her grand speech, Alma Coin it cuts back to Katniss, and she's looking into the cell that they have Peeta strapped down in, and he's going insane, and you see some level of holy crap, what's going on Katniss's face, and there's clearly some sort of emotional shift for her as she realizes that the person that she cares about hates her and fears her and wants to kill her, but you don't necessarily know how she's taking that, right? Because she has been given the assurance, we'll be able to figure this out. We'll be able to get rid of this mental programming that Pete has been given and actually revive him to care about you as he always has once again. And in that moment, you see that there's definitely concern around her face, but is that concern some level of hope that maybe he can get out of this? Is this some despair that he can't get out of this? Is there some other sorts of feelings that are going on with her? We don't really know. And so some of these things are left open-ended in regards to how we are supposed to feel about where this is going to go going forward, because there's question marks in the protagonist's mind, which are also going to be left in our minds watching the film. So anyways, we'll get to the themes and ideas around this film in just a second. But before we do, I think there's one other character that deserves a mention, and that's Finnick. Because Finnick has, in many ways, not involved in the Hunger Games like he was in the last one, where he was helping Katniss to escape. But in this one, he is actually a sounding board, if you will, as someone who has also gone through a similar struggle and pain that Katniss has gone through. The girl that he loves has also been captured, Annie, and he desperately wants to be back with her, but he cannot. What are your thoughts on Finnick in this film?
What I like about Finnick as a character is that in the Hunger Game, he is in the same boat as Katniss is, in a way. It's like, because in the games, in the last movie, we saw him performing in the games, like putting on his persona, acting out. It's only in that one moment where he thought he heard Annie's voice, that he starts to like he has to go off by himself in the water for a minute, and it's just like so in the prior movie we only got a glimpse of who he actually was. In this movie there is nothing to show, so he's actually acting more like himself. We see that he is very concerned about this girl named Annie. We see how he has been broken by the games, same way that Katniss has, because he's having the same nightmare she is. You see that he is just as broken as she is and struggling the same way. So, like, in a way, Katniss finds camaraderie and comfort in his presence because it's someone who actually knows what she's going through.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So,
and one of the nice things that he is as an addition is he gives voice to some of the ideas and feelings that Katniss is having that she's not willing to voice, right?
yes.
Because she's a little more stoic and reactionary as a character. She's not one that willingly talks to other people about how she's feeling, right? And so he is a little more willing to do that. And because he's going through the same things, not only does she feel like she can't talk to him, but also you can get that as the audience that you wouldn't necessarily get otherwise through him. So he was a really good, both like from a storytelling perspective, he was a really good tool to portray those emotions, but then also you get some of his development as his own character as well. So you get to see his own arc and struggle as what he's going through and how that parallels what Katniss is going through. But yeah, anyways, this film ended, like we just said, on a cliffhanger. Did you think that that causes problems in regards to the arc of characters or the themes of the film or ideas that are presented? Do you think that those end on a cohesive note, or do you think that those are left open-ended because the story of this film was not complete?
Well, because the first part of this movie begins and like it ends when Peeta is brought back to 13. The movie, so before that, it is a conflict of ideals. It is a conflict of messaging and symbolism in the open form, if you will. Because it's like, as you said, Katniss doesn't see a whole lot of frontline action. She sees some, but most of the like conflict comes between like the messages that Katniss puts out, that District 13 puts out, and then the messages that the Capitol and Peeta puts out. It's like it's direct conflict against each other and like trying to convince the districts like, oh, you should be like putting down your arms, like, oh no, you should keep fighting. And then even though you don't see them on the front line, you see glimpses of the actual conflict in the districts. You keep cutting to the districts showing like what is happening, like people getting hurt, people dying, laying down their lives and like fighting, and like you see in a way, even though like as you said before, you see the soldiers of the Capitol out and about, and you don't see Snow out and about. It's a way, it's kind of like a big game of chess, where like the soldiers and the people are like pawns and pieces on the board, or like taking out targets and like hurting the district, like taking stuff away from the Capitol, but also hurting the rebels. It's this back and forth, and it's played through symbolism. In a way, like the themes and symbolism, like the themes of this movie is like how symbols. You just see how symbols are used in conflicts like this, how they're used to motivate people and get people to pick a side, if you will, and how to like, and what actually matters to people. So it's really about how propaganda gets people to choose a side and to fight. So
yeah,
for what they believe.
Yeah, and how propaganda fights propaganda. It is definitely, the propaganda idea is expressed a lot, and there is some. I mean, it's a continuing theme of the stories in some ways, because the whole Hunger Games is a form of propaganda for the state. It's just now in this one you're seeing it used against the state in the cause of this rebellion. So it's definitely a strong element. I guess my overall thoughts is that I don't know that it comes to a conclusion, because you don't see where the propaganda terminates into in this one.
Well, because Peeta is the spokesperson for the Capitol, when he is captured and brought back to the 13, he is no longer their spokesperson. That is what I was thinking. Now, that is maybe not clearly said in the movie. That's not clearly said in the story. But that is what happens. happens. And even in the books, that's kind of what happens too, where it's like he's no longer their mouthpiece, if you will. At that point, it's just Caesar Flickerman talking to the people. So, so the conflict after, and that's the other reason I think why they probably split it at the midpoint is because once Peeta is captured, the conflict changes. Because after this, I mean, we have to rewatch part 2, but I do remember that part 2 has more frontline action compared to the first one. So we definitely see more conflict and action sequences in the second part as opposed to the first part.
Right.
So.
Yeah. 100%. And that makes sense. And I guess you could come to the conclusion that the propaganda aspect of the film might be over at this point. Yeah, I guess I'm like sitting here trying to think like what is the conclusion I'm supposed to draw as an audience about propaganda based off of what we've seen so far in the films. And I'm not sure what the answer is.
Yeah.
And is like maybe that's intentional. Like I almost came to the conclusion that in this film, because it is part 1 of a book and there's a second part to come, maybe the idea, and actually the more I think about it, the more I think, because I know what happens in the next one, and we'll get to that in the next one, but I think that some of those themes, while most of it is covered in this one, there are a few bits that are added to at the end of the next one. And so maybe this theme, like maybe it's intentional if they're left blank because they haven't gone through their full arc. Yeah. Which I'm kind of okay with. Like the way that this one's developed is because it's so clearly, it leaves things open-ended. You know, the other themes of, for example, love and like the complexity of love and betrayal in love. And those ideas are also left open-ended, like we were just talking about with Katniss and how she's looking at Peeta in his cell, not sure how to think about things, right? And so we as audience are left with questions in regards to that one as well. And so there's a couple of films that leave questions more than answers in regards to the ideas that they're trying to present. And I was kind of the conclusion, and I think I still am, that they are simply left as questions, and that we'll have to wait till the next one to get the full answer to those.
Yeah. I mean, I don't think the movie is trying to conclude this with a like message, if you will. I mean, there are definitely themes and ideas like regarding messaging and symbols and how like how messaging itself is used to move people. You might be able to draw something out of the conflict of how Peeta and Katniss are like that, like how they are the faces of that propaganda for each side, even though they love each other and they're supposed to. I mean, you might be able to draw something out of that from the conflict of this movie, but I'm not completely sure what that would be. Right? Because they are directly opposed to each other is the thing. Like they're both like in opposite roles to each other. You're not sure what it is. In a way, you know what Katniss is fighting for, but you don't know what Peeta is fighting for till the very end of the story. So I guess it's just one of those things where it's like it's almost like the whole idea of belief, like what do you choose to believe kind of thing, or it's like like what is like your belief based on, like what is pushing you forward, because that's what they keep like pushing others to believe in, like try to get them to choose like believe in something so they take action, like believe something and take action, or to stop taking action, if you will. Was like
yeah, and there that even goes in some ways like how belief ties into how propaganda works. Like, are you using propaganda because you're trying to get someone to believe a lie to achieve your own ends? For example, what the Capitol is doing, or are you trying to use propaganda to further the ends of something that you are genuinely invested in, right? In the case of the resistance, where they are trying to push the cause for freedom for the districts. And in doing so, they are clearly using propaganda to get to that end. But is that necessarily wrong or bad? I mean, the impression, at least in the film, is definitely not.
Well, yeah. I mean, this gets. I mean, at that point, you're just like, there's all sorts of discussions to be had. I mean, about like messaging and propaganda and such. I mean, I think for most people, the whole idea is like, what is the truth? Like, what are you like? is the message the truth of the situation, or are you twisting it to get a specific reaction out of people? Are you trying to force people into a idea, into a belief system that may or may not be true? Like, is that the goal? And so it's like, you could
it's
say
an amplifier.
So, I don't even know completely. Yeah, but this movie doesn't exactly take a firm stance, if you will, on it, because there's no clear message to be drawn. It does ask questions, and interesting questions at that, but I don't know if it like answers any of those questions, at least on this first part. So
and I think that's probably fair to leave it there on this one. We'll probably revisit it in the next one, but for now we'll let it lie at that point.
Well, there's definitely things from this movie we should definitely revisit the second part, but we'll get
for sure, and we will. What are your thoughts on the lasting impact of this film? I mean, they made a one after that. Obviously, part 2 was being shot at the same time as part 1, so it came out a year later. Do you think that this film specifically has a lasting impact, or the series as a whole? Well, I guess the series as a whole we should save for next time. So I guess this one specifically.
Yeah. So, I mean, if we're going to talk about this one specifically, if I had to guess, I don't actually know if you're going to rank all the Hunger Games books and movies, which one falls in last place in people's minds. I would almost say this one in my mind ranks least, but that's only because it doesn't have a proper conclusion to some of its ideas.
But the eternal flaw of mid-movies.
Yeah, well, like even then, it's like, because Catching Fire is technically a mid-movie as well, but it actually had complete themes and ideas to it, even though we discussed that last podcast. So I would say that I actually liked Catching Fire more than I like this one. And I think a mid-movie can't have, like, a complete themes and character arcs and everything, even though it continues on, the story continues on to another movie. You can have, like a milestone, if you will, at the end of the movie, which shows an arc from beginning to end.
Yes. So I definitely agree with that.
I think this part 1, it doesn't have a complete that milestone, if you will, or at least it's not clearly there. It's hidden among the reeds somewhere, if it is there. It's hard to see it. But with that being said, it's like, because I've read Mockingjay and I know how dense the book is, so I know that there's a reason they divided it into part 1 and part 2. So, and I'm sure we'll discuss that part of it again, like why it was divided to part 1, part 2, and when we come back to this next time. But this is more due to the length of the, like, how much they're trying to include in the movie, and less due to the themes and, like, trying to create a complete arc, if you will. They tried to give it a, like, good segue to the next part by making Peeta's brought back to 13 as the transition point, if you will. But I would say that was good, but
no, like I said at the beginning, I think the bookends of this are excellent because you have the emotional ideas presented at the beginning are also the emotional ideas you see at the end, but in a new light, and you see that with the way that they present Peeta. So I really think that the bookends made this feel great in regards to a viewing, right? They open it strongly, they end it strongly, and I think the middle, it could use some work, but overall it wasn't terrible. And it's easy to forget that when the beginning and the ending are completed in tones like it was. So I think that it was well done. I think that it did well. I mean, there's no doubt about that. It cost $140 million to produce and brought in 755. So, I mean, in regards to success, that's definitely success, right? You like to see that when you're when you're the production company. So, and it won awards too, and not nearly as many as some of the previous ones, but it definitely was notable in regards to the what did it win? The Critics' Choice Award and things like that. So, yeah, it was good. We'll see more to come in the next one because that's where it really comes to a climactic conclusion. The only other thing that I saw that was interesting about this, which was in the cultural zeitgeist, was this at this point in the series, it was actually being used as a symbol outside of the series. And I don't know if you knew this, but the three-handed or three-fingered salute, the rebellion type salute that they do in the films, when this one came out, was actually being used as a form of dissent in Thailand during the military dictatorship which occurred over there, and people were being arrested for using the three-hand salute or the three-finger salute. And they actually pulled this film from the theaters out there because of the disrest or that it was causing. So, a little interesting tidbit about how this affected the culture back at the time that it was released. So it was at least having an impact on a minor global scale when it came out, which I was not expecting that a film would do something like that. But there you go.
It's the same thing as, what was it, Somalia, Philippines, or they're using the One Piece flag, or is it a form of protest?
Oh, really? I didn't know that.
This happened recently in the last few months. I was like, what the heck? The government start cracking down on One Piece flags.
That one, okay, that one's a little weird. I don't understand that one, but maybe I'm not a One Piece guy. So,
I do remember, I think like shortly after the first one came out, there was some controversy on the first one, but that's because the first one showed kids, of course, killing each other. So a lot of parents went up in arms about it. So that created some controversy at the time.
Yeah.
So,
but I mean, hey, at least it's contributing to the body of discussion that's occurring in
yes.
the culture, for better or for worse. But there you go. I mean, that's what you got. Do you guys disagree? Leave it in the comments, whatever. But that's what we got for today. So that's the pod. We hope you all enjoyed. We'll be back, as we always are, next week. We'll see you all then.